Hey guys, welcome back to your favorite channel on YouTube, Chicago Reacts. I'm Zach, an actor here in the city of Chicago. And as always, on my left and your right, I am joined by the magnificently handsomely
Michael. Am I bailing you out on that one? I'm Michael, everybody. I'm an actor here in the city of Chicago. We're back with Chicago Reacts. We are reacting to Flamethrower, period, by Ahoy.
Suggested by Cerebral Cloud.
Cerebral Cloud.
Wow,
that's a tongue twister. Cerebral
Cloud.
Can't even say it fast.
It also sounds
Cerebral Clouds.
It's I'll tell you about that cloud. It's cerebral, all right.
Yeah. I'm just picturing like a brain floating in the sky.
Yeah, to me it also is
mist. Anyway,
you weren't an Xbox guy, really, right? But when Xbox would give you the gamer tags to start off, that to me sounds like Cerebral Cloud, digging plow. We're just random combinations
that they would
of
give
words.
you? That's
funny.
That
they would just give you. Cultic Toaster was one of my friends growing up. That
Cultic
and he just never changed it. And I'm like, dude,
that's great. That's so funny. Yeah. Cool. I'm excited to see what this video is about. I have no idea what it is.
Check out the description, guys. We got some cool additional content there from our other channel, Chicago Reacts Movies and TV, which we've got a Witcher Season 2 reaction coming out soon, and we've reacted to Band of Brothers, and there are other reactors there as well.
Yeah, go check out our Patreon for the full reaction. You can even watch Hell's Reach, the Warhammer 40K. We watched it as a movie, even though we know it was created in different parts. So go check out that full reaction. It's available for free on our Patreon, Chicago Reacts Movies and TV. That link is in the description down below. Check out our links down there as well as the links to the Discord and Chicago Plays. Ahoy! Flamethrower, period. Let's go.
All right, Cerebral Cloud.
Cerebral Cloud. Cerebral Cloud. Cerebral Cloud.
You are afraid. Amber lash of searing flame. Lungs filled with acrid smoke. You ought to be afraid. You're made out of meat. The flamethrower.
I like this guy's voice.
Yeah. A terrifying weapon capable of fiery devastation, and one so excessive it barely seems real.
Okay, this guy's voice is incredible.
So, very fun.
What practical purpose does such a weapon serve? Why is such a fearsome weapon so fascinating? And what sort of maniac would wield one? Fire has a long history. It's been used as a weapon since ancient times. And it's easy to see why. It's a destructive force that consumes all in its path, and all it needs is ignition. Greek fire is the first weapon that could be described as a flamethrower, a secret source of volatile compounds projected from ships in naval combat. It was used by the Byzantine Empire from the 7th century and could set the sea ablaze as well as enemy ships. It was a terrifying and effective weapon with profound impact. The modern flamethrower, as we know it today, was a German invention. The name flamethrower is a literal translation of Flammenwerfer.
Flammenwerfer?
The invention is generally attributed to Richard Fiedler, a mechanical engineer from Berlin. While working on nozzle designs, he was struck by the prospect of spraying a flammable liquid, then igniting it to project a gout of flame. His first flamethrower patent was granted in 1901, and by 1905, a working prototype was presented to the Prussian Engineering Committee for assessment. In 1908, Fiedler's flamethrower was assigned to the Pioneer Experimental Company in two forms: the Großflammenwerfer, or Grof, an emplaced weapon with a large tank, and the Kleine Flammenwerfer, or Kleif, a smaller backpack variant that could be carried.
What?
1914 saw the outbreak of the First World War, and it was the winter of that year, in the Argonne, against the French, that these flamethrowers were first fielded.
Dang.
However, they didn't prove particularly effective. The Kleif was too fragile, too unwieldy, and did not maintain pressure. The Germans saw their potential, however, and established the Flammenwerfer Abteilung Redemann, a unit armed exclusively with flamethrowers, commanded by Bernhard Redemann, who had played a key role in the technical development of the weapon. Their first attack was early in 1915, and they would see considerable subsequent deployment, including the Second Battle of Ypres and the Battle of Verdun. Some of the shortfalls of the Clive were addressed in 1917 with the introduction of the Wechselapparat, or VEX. It had a distinctive donut-shaped tank and was much lighter. During the war, Redemann's flamethrower troops carried out 653 attacks. 82% were deemed successful. Flamethrower attacks were risky, but they could break through hardpoints and sap enemy morale like nothing else. So in the decades that followed, as the Second World War loomed, the flamethrower had not been forgotten, with many nations preparing their own implementation.
Can we just acknowledge, this is not where I thought this video was going when we started watching it.
I'm
started like crazy video game stuff.
Video game
this
stuff.
Is wild.
And here we are.
Now we're hearing like history of World War I, the development of the flamethrower. This is wild.
It's really cool. The production value is top notch, too.
I mean, what a way to pull you in, though. Because you're like, yeah, flamethrowers, whoa. And then I'm like, oh, the reality of using
it's a visual essay.
Flamethrowers?
It's a visual essay.
Yes.
By Ahoy.
This is
by
great.
Ahoy.
This is great. Thanks again, Cerebral Cloud. I said it.
The Germans replaced their earlier designs with the Flammenwerfer 41, yet lighter, more reliable, and easier to operate. The Brits had the Flamethrower Portable No. 2, which was a copy of the German Vex. The Italians had the Lancia Fiamma M40, the Japanese the Type 93 and Type 100, and the Soviets had the ROKS-2. The Americans introduced the M1 flamethrower in 1941, which used diesel oil or fuel oil, and the revised M1A1 in 1943 operated at a higher pressure to facilitate the use of napalm instead. By 1944, the M1 was succeeded by the much superior M2, with improved regulation, ergonomics, and a new rotary cartridge ignition system. The M2 design was successful, so much so that it saw use after World War II, in Korea and even Vietnam, although here it was supplanted by the more modern M9 design. Flamethrowers remained decisive weapons during the Second World War, but combat was evolving. Armoured tanks, more precise artillery, and aerial bombardment. In fact, by the latter part of the 20th century, the man-portable flamethrower was largely obsolete. Flame tanks offered a much safer way to clear out entrenched enemies, with none of the capacity or range restrictions a man-portable device might impose. Besides, these days it's much safer to just call in an airstrike than it is to attempt to burn them out. So most contemporary use of the flamethrower is either for non-combat purposes, such as controlled burns or clearing land, or in cinema, television, and games. Here, the flamethrower has evolved into its own unique thing. Terrifying and imposing on screen, and rather than an infantryman, you're more likely to see it in the hands of an action hero, or a fictional supervillain like Hank Scorpio or Elon Musk. The flamethrower is rooted in its military origins, however, and most of its earliest appearances are in the hands of American soldiers. Think Porkchop Hill and Hell is for Heroes. It's not often shown in use during this era. Immolation was a little too grisly for 1950s Hollywood, so most shots are reverse angle, the heroes discharging flame towards the camera. Burning Nazis implied rather than shown. By the 1970s, there was a shift, when directors no longer shied from the horrors of war, showing it center frame. The Deer Hunter is one of the more memorable depictions, focusing on the psychological effects of the Vietnam War. In games, wartime settings became popular with first-person shooters towards the end of the 90s, and although you won't find flamethrowers in the earliest examples, the weapon would soon become a staple part of their arsenal. Amongst the first was World War II GI, which was built on the Duke Nukem 3D engine and released in 1959.
It looks like Duke Nukem.
Call of Duty was hot on its heels, with the United Offensive add-on for the first game featuring the German Flammenwerfer 35. Treyarch, it seems, and their precursor Grey Matter Interactive have a bit of an affinity for flamethrowers.
I think I've heard this game.
The American campaign in Call of Duty World at War
started.
takes place in the Pacific Theater, where there is copious deployment of the American M2 against Japanese fortifications. And the Black Ops series has flamethrowers as well, either as a weapon attachment or as part of a specialist loadout. Fair to say, then, that military shooters are a bit of a hotspot for flamethrowers. If it's a game set in either of the World Wars, or even Vietnam, then there's a fairly good chance you'll find one. They're not confined to military shooters, though. There is a considerable intersection between the war and horror genres. They share a common psychological aspect. As terrible as it is, the flamethrower fits this union perfectly. It's a potent symbol of inhumanity, the depths to which conflict can drive us. I think for this reason we prefer to see such weapons used against inhuman enemies. Something for which we feel no empathy. Something dangerous enough to drive us to extreme measure. An early example is Them, a 1954 science fiction film where giant irradiated ants terrorize the United States. With the threat of widespread infestation, the only hope is to purge their nests, queen and all, with cleansing fire. This is parallel to the Alien series, in which incinerator units play a prominent role and prove to be a reasonably effective weapon against the xenomorph threat.
Yes.
Not as effective as nuking the entire site from orbit, but it'll do in a pinch. The Alien franchise has exerted considerable influence on the sci-fi horror genre, and there's no shortage of games that take direct influence. Prominent amongst them are Bungie's. The Marathon trilogy features a flamethrower, first found in a level named Smells Like Napalm, Tastes Like Chicken. It's very satisfying to use against organic enemies. The high-pitched screams of the Thor as their scorched forms collapse is quite memorable. The Halo series features one too, of course. The Flood burn quite nicely. Fire was used in a similar capacity in 1982's The Thing, with an insidious alien parasite masquerading as human.
Yes.
A flamethrower is the obvious solution. It seems they're a natural fit for horror sci-fi. So while the necromorphs from the Dead Space trilogy are best dismembered, the hydrazine torch remains effective. The Warhammer universe is no stranger to the flamer either.
Yeah, not surprising.
When bullets fail, fire prevails. Many of the scariest monsters in science fiction are bulletproof, but fire consumes all. It is an indiscriminate force, burning friend or foe.
That's
Its alignment remarkably chaotic.
That's flamethrower to the
reason,
face.
the flamethrower is sometimes used to denote a character or setting as anarchistic. Mad Max 2 serves as a good example of this, and a flamethrower-wielding maniac doesn't look out of place in any post-apocalyptic fiction. I think this goes some way to explaining the popularity in video games too. The sandbox paradigm that seeks to give the player freedom. You see that mountain? You can burn it. The nature of fire-based weapons is particularly apt for emergent gameplay. Some games let you use fire as a tool of area denial, setting the environment alight. The Far Cry series is an excellent example, notably Far Cry 2, which introduced the flamethrower. A single spark can set swathes of savannah alight, whether you meant to or not. This adds a chaotic element to encounters, one which can be mastered and used to your advantage, but one that can easily get out of hand and place you in a difficult situation. I'm sad to say they toned it down slightly for the sequels, but fire propagation remains present, and the flamethrower a major part of Far Cry's charm. One mission from Far Cry 3 is particularly memorable. in which you incinerate a drug crop, progressively becoming more affected by the fumes. Reminiscent of a similar task in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Another unifying trait of flamethrowers in video games is their ability to deal damage for a duration after the initial attack. The afterburn. Setting enemies alight might not kill them immediately, but once they're on fire, they'll suffer continuous damage, which might be enough to finish them off. This has significant tactical impact in games like Team Fortress 2. With the pyro, it's often best to hit and run than face your opponent to the bitter end. Let the fire do the work. Even in more realistic military shooters, similar ambush tactics play to the strength of the weapon. The luminous plume of the flamethrower attracts a lot of attention, so the less time you spend in the line of fire, the better. Once the novelty of the flamethrower wears off, however, it turns out that in many games, they are generally not very viable weapons. Sure, they're usually immensely powerful up close, but their range is always terrible, and ammunition very scarce. This is exacerbated in multiplayer, where balance is key, and the flamethrower often made puny. This is sometimes addressed by having it as a kill streak reward or as a strategic power weapon that must be captured. But even so, they remain a difficult class of weapons to use effectively. To be fair, this mirrors the real world. Flamethrowers are only needed in niche roles, and carrying one makes you a priority target for the enemy. And it's hard to blame them. Who wants to be burnt alive? The flamethrower is a frightful weapon that plays to our most primal fear. Born of grim necessity, it is an illumination of horror. Fire is a savage beast, and yet we think ourselves its master. But be warned, the barbecue's hot, and you're in season.
Okay, I loved that. The voice actor was so good, and
the voice is so good.
I loved how they showed all those different games. Like it was literally like a walk through gaming history, and then how they relate it. They set the foundation first
with
for
like the history, the actual history of the weapon.
Yeah, that was really cool. Like
that's pretty unique. We've seen like evolution of games or comparing games, or we've seen but looking at breaking down something like that specific, the flamethrower.
Yeah, that was
very cool. Thank you, Cerebral Cloud.
What an awesome suggestion.
That was so much fun. And Ahoy, have we seen? That was new, right?
I think so. The Buy Ahoy thing.
It was new. Kit and Kier. Okay, it was new for us. I was gonna say. I was like, I don't know if I'm recognizing that name from I saw someone else watch it, or from Chips Ahoy.
Chips Ahoy. That's what I was thinking. I was like,
this is ringing the bell in my brain, but I don't know where.
Yeah.
Or maybe I was just thinking of Flamin' Waffle.
Yeah, Flamin' Waffle.
Oh man.
Flame Heresy.
Yeah, that was so fast. I mean, again, I was picturing something so wild when we started watching.
Yeah.
To then go into this history and then like the philosophical and like sort of like
it was
ideology of like what does a flamethrower mean, and like the gruesome and intense.
It was and the production value was good enough to like not keep you like bored, even if it was a topic that maybe we weren't necessarily interested in. But the exploring that relationship between games, it was just like it was really creatively done, and I mean it just like had me hooked. It was a video essay that was just incredibly well done, from the actual like editing and composition of a story, but then in conjunction with all the different gameplay footage that they went and got, and then the narrator, excellent.
So good. And the history, the history and the really psychology of what a flamethrower means, because to me, I think it's interesting to me, it makes me think of like how war propagates like
very different ways of thinking. Like,
it helps technologies. Like it promotes the evolution of technologies or new technologies, which is like the dark side of war. But it's just like this German engineer who's looking at like valve technology, and then the government's like, oh yeah, we could use that to burn people. Like that is what? And I don't know if this. Yeah, I just think it's kind of sick and twisted. But I like that they addressed it in the video, and and obviously, every military service has used flamethrowers, so it's not like it's uniquely horrifying. And I think that's cool how, it makes so much sense that it's used so much in like sci-fi horror stuff when you're burning things that aren't human.
It was a weapon born for strategic purposes, and it was sci-fi where they got to be inspired to use it on the offensive and actually use it as like an offensive weapon.
I'm surprised he didn't bring up the flamethrower guitar from Mad Max Fury Road, though. Yeah. Because, that's where, you transform it into art, where it's used to, like, rock out, man. And, use this. Anyway.
Dude, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The Greeks didn't know that we'd be using the same thing.
No, they did
in music shows in the future.
Right. I think they did. I think like Aristotle and Socrates and Plato and Diogenes.
Is it at the end of the play? Fire shoots up from the stage.
Yeah. Guys,
that was awesome. Thank you, Cerebral Cloud, for the suggestion. If you thought that was awesome, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything else. And leave a comment in that comment section down below.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time
on Chicago Reacts.